Hey everyone, UEBS 2 Hub here, and in this video, I'll be giving you a basic tutorial of all the, basics for Ultimate Epic Battle Simulator 2, and of course, because of that, I will start here on the start screen. And on the start screen, you have 4 buttons: Start, Browse Mods, Options, and Exit, at least currently. And we'll just start with Browse Mods because Start and Exit are pretty explanatory. This will bring you to the next screen, whereas this exits you from the game. Now, once you click Browse Mods, this brings you to the Steam Workshop, where pretty much you can download any mod that you want. For example, a Galactic Soldier, an Insurgent, Space Marine. You can go to Trending, for example. Newest as well. This is another really good one. This is what I use. You have the Soviet T-34, Samurai Soldier, so on and so forth. You can get a Panzer tank. And now, these are all made by content creators, by people who actually make the model and put it into the Steam Workshop. And pretty much what happens is once you press this button, or for example, if I wanted to get the Type 97 Chiha 45, because my main channel is Tankenstein, if you guys didn't know, check that channel out. I do War Thunder gameplay. Click on this, and as you can probably see, it downloaded. Now, the thing is, I can't just press start, go to the next screen, and then use it. You actually have to exit the game first, so bear that in mind. But that being said, that's pretty much mods, and I'll show you exactly how you can access the mods once you get a little bit further in this video. But before that, let's get into the options. So obviously here, this is a really basic options screen. I wouldn't be surprised if it changes in the future, but for now, it's pretty basic, thankfully. Overall, this is pretty much something like if I were to click very high, for example, it would set all these to very high. If I were to click low, it'd set them all to low. Pretty much all that does is just select all these to the same exact setting. Now, when it comes to the specific settings, character mesh detail, this pretty much just kind of goes on a scale from potato to ultra, and this is exactly what your army units look like when you look at them. And you can, of course, see more detail the closer you get, but pretty much if you were just to go to potato, there'd be fewer polygons used, and thus they would look a little bit more blocky, maybe a little bit more ugly, whereas Ultra is going to look as good as it can be. But also bear in mind when it comes to all these settings, one of the things is that, let's say if you don't have a great graphics card, or if you're planning on using a ton of different enemies and units on the screen, having higher settings will be more taxing on a per unit basis to your graphics card. So if you were to use Ultra, for example, you could probably get, let's say, fewer zombies, for example, on screen than you would if you were to be able to use high or medium. Currently, for example, I can pretty reliably, depending on what the other units are, get around 2 to 3, maybe even 3.5 million zombies on screen with these current settings. But if I were to go to medium, maybe I can get another 500,000 or 250,000 out of it. That's pretty much what that is. Next up, we have bone animators. Now, this one is kind of interesting. So it pretty much, as the thing says here, dynamic animations such as head turning and blinking. So the higher that this is, the better that, I guess, the more lifelike your units will be in terms of how they act, at least at a standstill. Next up, we have post-processing. This is pretty much going to kind of round out your unit, so to speak. So it's kind of a further beautifying, if you will, over top of the just general textures. You can think of this as character textures. And then next up, you have environment and textures, of course. This is going to make your landscapes look better, your buildings look better, so on and so forth. Not incredibly important, but it is there because some people really like a nice environment. And then finally, shadows and lighting. Of course, that's just going to make it so that your lighting is a bit more dynamic, so that it maybe looks a little bit more lifelike, rather than, let's say if it was on potato quality, it might just be flat light all around, and there will be no shadows anywhere. So bear that in mind. And finally, you also have show FPS. This is pretty useful to determine exactly how pushed your graphics card is being on any sort of settings. And then, of course, you have audio. Music volume I have turned down because I don't want to get copyright struck, and master volume kind of turns everything either up or down. I should probably turn that up a touch, but that's that. Now you go into start, and then you have sandbox and campaigns. there aren't really too many campaigns as of the time that I make this video, but pretty much what will happen is you can click on any of these things and it just kind of tells you exactly how to do. So first person, you have RTS, which I'll kind of show soon, and it's, again, pretty basic. You only have like 3 levels here. You click on this, go to start level. I'm not going to do that, but it tells you exactly what you're going to do. You have to lead your armies. I believe it's a preset army, preset enemies as well, and that is that. And of course, there are no custom campaigns right now, but we are just now in version 1.0, so also bear that in mind. Lots of extra UEBS 2 content to come. And then the main thing most people will be going to is the Sandbox, as you can see here. This is typically the map I use because it's just a blank, I guess you could say, landscape. It's just dunes. Of course, dunes do create a little bit of a high ground and depressions in some areas, so you have to bear that in mind, but this is where you can access different maps. So as you can see, different maps have different sizes. So for example, this 6.6, this is from this side to this side. That is showing exactly how big that is. So pretty much every time I zoom in, you're getting about half a kilometer or so zoomed in, right? And then you can go to Egyptian City. This is only 3.9 kilometers wide, so this is also really helpful when you're thinking to yourself, well, hey, my graphics card can only handle so much. But of course, I'll show you guys exactly how to kind of limit the effect on your graphics card. Let's say if you have an oversized map, again, I prefer Desert Dunes. A huge map, if there ever was one, it's about 9 kilometers wide, and I'll show you exactly how. But you also have this, and this is a pretty new setting. You have random, you have sunny with clouds, overcast. Soon enough, we will probably be getting thunderstorms, all of that. You have different times that you can select, which is pretty cool. You can freeze time. That way, time does not advance in your battle, which is pretty damn cool. Now, next up, this is what most people are probably asking about, the units. So you can select all of your units here. So you have Roman, Ancient Greece, animals, so on and so forth. And then here you have your modded units. These are the units that I would have downloaded before. So let's just select 5,000 T-34s. That's what I downloaded before. And versus, I don't know, 5,000 of the Panther tanks. So or Panzer tanks. Well, I guess Panther tanks because they are Panzer 5s. This would have been something you might have seen, at least on a smaller scale, in World War II, being that only 6,000 of these were ever made, and something like 50,000 T-34s were made, or even more than that, regardless. So what it comes down to is you also have teams and all that. This is very important, especially if you want a multifaceted game mode, especially maybe if you want Battle Royale. You can go into this, select Team 3, select Team 4. Right now, as far as I know, we only have up to Team 4. So you can only have 4 different groups kind of fighting each other. So, for example, Team 2 here, these two, so blue and purple, will be a united front, and they'll fight against green, red, and yellow. So it's, you can kind of do that. You can make it so that, let's say if you're on the city of Troy, for example, you can have one team of archers come over here, and then they'll be firing at, some other team, while Team 2, while their comrades might be tanks or something. I don't know, right? So you can kind of make it whatever you want. You can also do attack, hold, and guard. Now, hold will basically mean your units sit in place. So that's actually pretty useful. Let's say if you have a swarm of zombies coming up against you, and you have like a bunch of Spartans trying to defend themselves, that'll be useful for them to hold. Meanwhile, let's say if you have archers behind them, they can attack. Guard, if I'm not mistaken, is pretty much just kind of like if any units come near you, for example. So like, let's say if some units come within X or Y range of this, they will attack, but once they are defeated, they'll kind of stand down, even if there's another battle raging over here. So important to remember. Down here, you have reset all, pretty useful in my opinion. Now let's go to spacing. So this is also pretty important. It's not as important with smaller units, like human-sized units, such as soldiers or things of that nature, zombies, for example. But if you're using something like a T-Rex, spacing is very important. So if, for example, another thing that might also be very important actually is if you have artillery lined up or tanks facing one group, the more spaced out they are from each other, the less splash damage each one will incur, at least in theory, right? So this is kind of like how they start off. Of course, units have a tendency to crush down on each other as battles start, so you also have to bear that in mind. So, I mean, right now, this is, again, how they start, but eventually they'll just kind of coalesce down here. Now, rank shape is also very important. This is kind of like, if I were to set this to 1, it's more or less a square. If I were to put 1.1, it goes a little bit more rectangular, and basically, the higher this number is, the wider the front is. So, this is a good tool, for example. Let's say if I were to have, I don't know, I'm not going to do 100,000, but like 50,000 T-Rexes versus 5 million zombies. And as you'll probably see, it's unplayable, right? Right now, because my graphics card isn't that good. If I were to do this, where it's 5 million zombies in a rank shape of 2, now I can set it up where these 50,000 T-Rexes can flank around and get the zombies from the side. Whereas if I were to do this as a 2, the zombies would be able to flank around and get the T-Rexes. So this is a really good way to kind of, especially on open terrain like this, set it up so that one side gets an advantage over the other. So you always have to bear that in mind. And much the same goes for spacing as well, because it works kind of in a similar way, but of course a little bit different. It just kind of modifies the starting position, but the rank, again, really can determine a huge amount when it comes down to overall gameplay, so to speak. Now, at this point, it's pretty straightforward for the most part, but I'll go over the rest. Of course, down here, you can add how many armies you want. Again, remember before you get into the battle to assign your teams and assign their orders, because that is extremely important if you want to actually have a match go the way that you want. If I want to save this battle, I could just click on Save Battle, and then this exact setup, with Sunny with Clouds, 8 a.m. Desert Dunes, with T-Rexes versus zombies would be saved, and I can just go here, click on previous battle, and it'll load up whenever I want, which is pretty cool. You could delete it. It's very, very nice. Now, some of the other options down here, RTS mode enabled. This is very interesting because you can actually, let's say if I were to shrink this down to 1 million zombies so my computer doesn't fry itself, and maybe like 10,000 T-Rexes so that all those zombies don't die immediately, and give them a slight advantage when it comes to the flanking. Let's say if I wanted to enable RTS mode, you could then see, once I get into the match here, that you'll be able to select on a whole bunch of zombies and give them individual orders, which is really, really cool. Same goes with the T-Rexes. You can select any team that you want in the match. Next up, we have blood volumes. This is also pretty interesting because let's say if a whole bunch of units die and there's like a little depression in the land here that's like a circular depression, a bunch of blood will flow down there, and then any enemies that go into that, so long as it's sufficiently deep blood, like a lake of blood almost, they could drown in blood. It's a very, very interesting idea. I always have it selected, but that's just me, because that's who I am. Next up, we have map boundary local to battle. Pretty much what I was saying before with how big this map is, for example, it's about 9 kilometers wide. That eats up a lot of RAM, a lot of VRAM. And so if you have map boundary local to battle, this will make it so that it's much closer to the actual battle. So these units are only about 2 or so kilometers wide, right, in total. About 2 and a 2.15. And so what's the point of having a 9 kilometer wide map that's eating up so much of your memory when really you only need this? And that's pretty much what that does. I always have this selected because otherwise it's ridiculous. And you can actually see here, it goes from no warning to moderately slow, because now if I were to get into the battle, it would have to continuously have all of this rendered, which is ridiculous. Next up, we have no gore, which I personally don't select because why would I? But overall, that's pretty much the basics. And one final thing before we just get into the match, and I'll show you RTS mode real quick. Character customization. This one's really interesting. From here on the right side, you can select new units, and this selects everything. So this is everything that you own and everything that you may have downloaded as well. So this has all the standard units, for example. Roman Soldier. This one, at least as of right now, pops up every single time that you get into this. But you could also select Ostriches, Action Man, who's basically Keanu Reeves. You can click on Mongolian Soldier, whatever you'd like. B1 Battle Droid, pretty cool. And from here, you can modify them. So let's say if I thought that this was a little strong for battle droids because in the movies they weren't actually that strong, put that down to 600, put this down to 50, maybe make them a little bit less accurate because they're always quite a bit less accurate in the movies. You can decrease or increase their attack speed modifier. You can increase their attack range, impact force. Basically what impact force does is, let's say if you were to kill an enemy, then this will make them fly. So you can, it gets pretty crazy, but that can also impact things a bit, because what'll happen is sometimes if you, like, let's say set this to like 30, right? Enemies will fly pretty high, and the game doesn't register deaths, at least as of current, until the unit hits the ground. So if you have a whole bunch of enemies attacking, or a whole bunch of your units attacking one group or one single enemy, and this thing just starts flying up in the air, even though he's should be counted as dead, he's not, and so you'll have a whole bunch of range targets attacking up into the air at a unit that's essentially dead, and meanwhile they're wasting all their shots that they could be using against still living targets. So at this point, I'd like to keep this down. Typically like up to 5 or something like that is pretty cool. Splash damage, of course, it's pretty much damage, but in a range around the target that you're hitting. So for example, if I were to put 10, and then splash damage radius, I believe that's something like 5 meters around the enemy. So basically, this means that everyone within 10 meters, or within 5 meters rather, of the person that this guy shoots directly will receive 10 damage. So it's a pretty cool thing, makes more sense with artillery, but you can really do that with anything that you want. Of course, you can also make it so that these guys are ranged or not ranged simply by clicking this check mark, and this gives you a whole bunch of options for what sort of, I guess you could say, ranged attack they want. Otherwise, you have, again, your accuracy. So this, at this point, is going to be every 6 out of every 10 shots they will land. Meanwhile, you also have your melee block chance. All this pretty self-explanatory. This kind of gives you, let's say, a 50% chance to block any ranged attacks, which wouldn't make much sense, but you could do that. And then down here, of course, you can name him whatever you want. B1 droid guy or something. I'm not going to do that, but meanwhile, you also have all of your units that you've customized in the past. So, for example, Super Chuck Norris, right? I gave him a whole ton of health, damage, attack speed multiplier, all this, and you can just kind of go through and do that. And bear in mind, even though this guy's melee, you can select this to make him ranged. And let's say, for example, you want to make him an electric wizard Chuck Norris. You can make him an electric wizard Chuck Norris just by doing that. Is range, electric beam, boom. You want to give him a tank shell to fire? Boom, you have it right there. And you can only fire it at this point at a 5 meter range, but of course you can put that up to, I don't know, 999 for example, because that's the top range, or 900's the range. Just like that, and because he's perfect, he will be able to fire those ridiculously far and hit tons of enemies and cause a ton of splash damage with a huge impact force. You guys get the idea. Now, that being said, let's get into RTS mode, and I'll just show you real briefly exactly what that is, but otherwise this video is just about done. And also, again, if I haven't mentioned it, freeze time basically just keeps it, no matter how long this battle goes on for, it'll keep it at the time that you have selected. Okay, so here we are in the battle, just about to start. And if this looks like a similar battle, I've actually released, I think, pretty much this exact same battle, but it was like 5,000 T-Rexes, but the T-Rexes won, so 10,000 still gonna wipe the floor with a million zombies. Regardless, so you press R to get into RTS mode, and simple as that, you can select your team up here. Team 1, if I'm not mistaken, are the T-Rexes, which is why they are selectable, whereas Team 2 are the zombies. Now, this type of game mode, like, this is really, really cool in my opinion, but this type of game mode can impact your RAM usage. So if you have a really good graphics card, sure, go ahead. But it can get a little bit weird, and you can see how many units are selected down here. So I've got almost 90,000. Let's just select this. I've got over 250,000 units. I've got almost 300,000. You can boss these things around all to whatever extent that you want, and you could select, hey, go over here, go over here, and go over here, attack, you know, and select your change, your different move order, so on and so forth. Cancel your orders. This is to, guard once your primary is finished, whatever. Hold position once it's finished. Continue to attack once it's finished. Pretty damn basic. I'll just kind of show you guys once this goes. These guys are holding because They have no orders, and now they're just charging in, I think, without attacking, perhaps? I'm not entirely sure, but let's get down here. Okay, so it looks like once they hit that wall, they are attacking, but you guys get the idea. But as you saw, they were totally stopped until I actually gave the orders to go. Now, let's get out of RTS mode and just kind of go down here, and I'll just kind of run through these final ones real quick. So I can select F to possess a unit. I've got a T-Rex, getting a lot of damage here. Select C to do Battle Cry, which is basically just one of a few different preset voice animations that they have. For T-Rexes, it's something like brrr. If that makes any sense, you can run them out into a field of zombies, which of course is not going to last long, but, you know, once he's dead, you can just press unselect, unpossess, and you're pretty much scot-free. Or if you want, while they're still alive, you can just do this and then unselect, and there you go. And again, that's done with the F button. Go into slow motion mode. As you can see, these zombies are now flying through the air in slow motion. I unselect that or deselect that, and now they're going down in regular motion. And finally, cinematic mode, which basically just gets rid of the HUD or the heads-up display and makes everything look just that much prettier if you are trying to get some sort of cinematic thing done, or if you want to take a screenshot. I guess really the final thing here are on top, you might be able to see it says God Powers, so you can kind of scroll through. Right now I've got none selected, but you can do Shotgun Smite. As you can see, this is one of the first ones that was ever introduced, but as you can see through that blood pattern, basically it just hits with a bunch of pellets, so to speak, and they don't really do a ton of damage on their own, but when you get closer, you can actually do quite a bit of damage. Next up, we have Noah's Flood. This one's pretty much just a point-based thing, so you can just do this. And eventually, units will drown under the water, which is pretty cool. And this will also get rid of any of the Kool-Aid, so to speak. So if I do this, as you can see, the Kool-Aid goes away as you get closer, and if this is sufficiently deep, these guys, it will turn it from a pool party into them drowning. And also, these do move over the landscape, so pretty cool. Next up, we have Nuke. So I can go that, launch that there. Of course, it's going to kill a bunch, but the range isn't all that incredible. Surprisingly, it barely scathed the dinosaurs, so that's cool. Next up, we have Tsunami. This pretty much creates a wall of water, of course, and it goes across for a short period of time, not all too long. Next, we have Tornado, which just basically gathers a whole bunch of these jabronis into a single thing. Pretty cool in my opinion, but that is, at least as of right now, all of the God Powers and pretty much everything, hopefully, everything that you might need to know about UEBS 2 and how it functions, at least thus far. So as you can see, they're running away from that tsunami. But either way, thanks so much for watching. Please, if you'd like this video, comment on it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Is there anything in this game that you guys might want to know, learn about, or know how to do better? I would love to do something like that, but, you know, of course, any ideas would be greatly appreciated. And there you go, also. There is your blood lake in which people can drown in, because it's not all that deep, but there are zombies in it. Or Kool-Aid Lake. That's a lake of Kool-Aid, mind you. So either way, thanks again, everyone, and I will see you all on the other side. Sorry, dinosaurs. Take care, everyone.